What if being untouchable didn't mean building walls but creating an unshakable foundation within yourself? What if the strength you're searching for is not in turning your heart into stone, but in learning to let it burn without being consumed? Most people confuse invulnerability with indifference. They believe to protect themselves they must numb themselves. They think that being untouchable means caring less, feeling less, becoming less. But there's a deeper truth. The kind of untouchability that matters doesn't come from ice. It comes from fire. It's the ability to walk through a storm without losing your softness. It's the ability to face betrayal without poisoning your spirit with bitterness. It's the ability to stand in the chaos of the world and still carry peace like a quiet flame. You don't have to become cold to be untouchable. You just have to understand where your worth truly rests, far beyond the hands of others, far beyond the noise of opinion, far beyond the shifting sands of circumstance. The question is not, how do I harden myself so no one can break me? The question is, how do I grow so deeply rooted that nothing can shake me? People often believe that to protect themselves they must harden their hearts, that to remain untouchable they must detach from others and bury their emotions under layers of ice. This idea comes from a deep fear of being hurt again, a fear of vulnerability, and a belief that if one becomes cold enough, unfeeling enough, distant enough, then no one will ever have the power to wound them. But this is not true strength, it is merely armor. And armor is heavy. Carry it long enough and it begins to suffocate you. The misconception lies in equating numbness with resilience, silence with wisdom, and isolation with safety. What people forget is that a life without feeling is not freedom, it is a prison. To reject pain is also to reject joy, and to shield yourself from heartbreak is to also shield yourself from love. Untouchable in its truest form is not about becoming unreachable or cold. It is about standing in the middle of life's storms with your heart still open, knowing that yes, you might bleed, but you will never break, because your foundation is not built on other people's hands, but on your own unwavering spirit. Machiavelli once wrote that it is safer to be feared than loved, and many interpret this as the ultimate strategy for survival, a blueprint for power. But fear isolates. It separates the ruler from the people, the leader from their followers, the human from other humans. A person who relies on fear and distance may indeed be protected from betrayal, but they are also protected from loyalty, from genuine connection, from bonds that endure beyond self-interest. The misconception here is that fear creates control and control creates safety. But what is a life lived in constant fear of being deceived, betrayed, or abandoned? It is a life that is already bound by chains. Emotional maturity does not demand that you push people away. It demands that you let them close, knowing full well that they may fail you, and that even if they do, you will not collapse. To be feared may protect your position, but to be grounded in yourself protects your soul, and that is the deeper, more lasting power. Many who believe coldness is strength point to the harshness of the world as justification. They say the world is cruel, so we must be crueler. They say people are selfish, so we must become untouchable. They convince themselves that empathy is weakness, that trust is a gamble, that vulnerability is a liability. Yet the irony is clear. The harder they try to protect themselves, the more fragile they become. A cold person may look impenetrable, but beneath that armor is a heart terrified of being seen, terrified of being known. They live with constant vigilance, scanning for threats, measuring every gesture, doubting every word. Is that freedom? Is that strength? Or is it another form of captivity, one disguised as power? True strength is not in the denial of feeling, but in the mastery of it. It is in being able to feel deeply and still act with clarity. It is in being able to feel deeply and still act with clarity. A strong person can love and still walk away when necessary. A strong person can trust and still stand alone when trust is broken. That is what untouchable really means. The misconception thrives because society rewards appearances of strength. People admire the one who seems unaffected, the one who doesn't flinch, the one who carries no visible scars. But what we often mistake as strength is merely suppression. The quiet person who never shows hurt is not always unbreakable. Sometimes they are simply crumbling in silence. The person who never cries, never bends, never falters may not be resilient. They may just be numb. And numbness is not resilience. It is emptiness. The untouchable that matters is not someone who has turned to stone, but someone who has turned their wounds into wisdom. Society teaches us that being unbothered, emotionless, detached is power. But in reality, power comes from being fully alive. To feel everything and still remain grounded is far harder than to feel nothing at all. One path makes you smaller, colder, less human. The other path expands you, strengthens you, and allows you to engage with life without losing yourself in the process. That is the deeper misunderstanding people carry, and why so many confuse isolation for independence. There is also a psychological allure to coldness, because it provides a false sense of control. When you cut yourself off from people, when you never allow anyone too close, you imagine you are safe. No one can betray you, no one can leave you, no one can destroy you because you have already withdrawn before they had the chance. But what this creates is not safety. It is loneliness disguised as strategy. You begin to live in suspicion, expecting betrayal before it happens, doubting love before it blossoms, resisting intimacy before it forms. This may seem untouchable on the outside, but inside it corrodes the spirit. The truth is, control is an illusion, and the attempt to control people, outcomes, or feelings only makes you more vulnerable to disappointment. Untouchable is not control. Untouchable is freedom. It is the freedom to trust, and to know that if trust breaks, you will not break. It is the freedom to love, and to know that if love fails, you will not lose yourself. That is what the cold never understand. Real untouchability is not about locking the world out, but about standing so firmly in yourself that the world cannot shake you. Coldness also creates a paradox. While it shields you from pain, it equally shields you from the warmth of human connection. A cold person may live without heartbreak, but they also live without intimacy. They may protect themselves from rejection, but they also protect themselves from acceptance. They may avoid betrayal, but they also avoid loyalty. This is the silent cost of believing coldness equals strength. The irony is that the very thing they seek, peace of mind, stability, untouchable, remains elusive because it cannot exist without connection, without love, without allowing oneself to feel. Coldness creates an appearance of stillness, but inside there is a storm of loneliness. The human heart was not designed to be numb. It was designed to feel, to open, to risk. When we strip it of that, we are not becoming stronger. We are simply cutting off a vital part of our humanity. Untouchable is not the one who never feels, but the one who feels everything yet remains unbroken. Coldness may look like strength, but it is only fear wearing a mask. The misconception also thrives because pain convinces us that vulnerability is a weakness. After heartbreak, betrayal, or loss, the memory of pain whispers, "Never again." It tricks us into believing that if we simply shut down, we can avoid the risk of being hurt. But avoiding risk also means avoiding growth. Every scar you carry is not a sign of weakness, but a sign that you lived, that you endured, that you are still standing. Coldness rejects scars. True strength embraces them. Being untouchable is not about never bleeding. It is about knowing that even if you bleed, you will heal. It is about allowing the wound to become wisdom instead of bitterness. Coldness closes the door forever. Strength opens the door again and again, not because it is naive, but because it knows the door cannot destroy what is eternal within. That is the essential misunderstanding of untouchability. It is not about avoiding pain. It is about transcending it, not by becoming less human, but by becoming fully human. Unafraid to feel, unafraid to risk, unafraid to rise again. Think back to the first time you truly felt betrayed by someone you trusted. It could have been a friend who exposed your secrets, a partner who broke your heart, or even a family member who made you feel unseen. The shock of it hits like a sudden storm. You replay the words, the actions, the moments where you thought everything was safe, and in that pain, a voice inside whispers, "You'll never let this happen again." So you begin to close off. You stop sharing as much. You hesitate before speaking. You hold back a piece of yourself, even when you want to give it freely. For a while, it feels safer, as though you've placed an invisible shield between yourself and the world. Yet the longer you live this way, the more you notice something missing. The laughter isn't as full. The conversations feel shallow and connections never run deep. You start realizing that the very thing you put up to protect yourself has also locked away your ability to truly feel alive. This is the human dilemma. The instinct to guard our hearts ends up suffocating them. Perhaps you've also experienced rejection that cut deeper than you expected. You gave your best effort, put your heart into something, whether it was love, a dream, or even just showing who you are, and the world said, not enough. That sting lingers because rejection always makes us question our worth. The first instinct is to say, fine, I'll never try again. I'll never give anyone the chance to make me feel this small. It feels like a reasonable defense, a way to stop the pain before it begins. But in doing so, you start shrinking your life. You stop going after opportunities. You silence your voice. You refuse to risk your heart. And while rejection no longer finds you, neither does fulfillment. You realize one day that you're not untouchable. You're just unseen. And the price of avoiding rejection is invisibility. The irony is that rejection was never proof that you were unworthy. It was proof that you were daring enough to try. And in hiding, you lose the very courage that once made you alive. Another experience that shapes people is being overlooked or undervalued when they gave everything they had. Maybe you worked tirelessly on something, hoping for recognition, hoping for validation, only to be ignored or replaced by someone who gave half the effort. The quiet anger and disappointment build. You tell yourself, I'll never give that much again. I'll never care that deeply again. Why should I? If it leads nowhere. But the truth is, it wasn't the giving that hurt. It was the expectation. When we tie our value to whether others see it, we hand them the power to define us. And when they fail to see, we feel empty. The danger is in letting that emptiness convince you to stop giving altogether. You begin to retreat into mediocrity, to withhold your light because no one seemed to notice it. Yet deep down, you know your spirit doesn't thrive in half-effort. You know there is a fire within you that dies when it is dimmed. The challenge then is not in protecting yourself from being overlooked, but in continuing to shine, even when the world doesn't applaud. There are also times when life itself seems to betray you. Illness, loss, failure, or sudden changes you never asked for can make you feel like the ground beneath you has collapsed. You tell yourself that if you had cared less, if you had expected less, maybe it wouldn't hurt as much. So you decide to toughen up. You try to numb yourself from hope, because hope feels dangerous, when life has proven it can shatter so quickly. But living without hope is not protection, it is surrender. The relatable experience here is that we all at some point try to stop dreaming in order to avoid disappointment. Yet the absence of dreaming doesn't remove disappointment. It removes the possibility of joy. You become untouchable, yes, but at the cost of being unreachable by life itself. You exist, but you do not live, and while that feels safe for a time, it eventually becomes unbearable because a spirit built to expand cannot survive in confinement. Maybe you've gone through a phase where you tried to mimic coldness as a shield. You decided to become the person who didn't care, who stayed quiet, who appeared unbothered. And for a while it worked. People thought you were mysterious, strong, above the drama. But behind closed doors you knew the truth. You still felt everything. You still carried the pain. You just didn't show it. And that silence ate away at you because suppressing emotions doesn't destroy them. It only buries them alive. They resurface in unexpected ways. In sudden anger, in unexplained sadness, in sleepless nights. You realize being untouchable in this way isn't about strength. It's about suffocation. Pretending you don't care doesn't make the hurt vanish. It just makes you live in constant denial. And over time, denial becomes more exhausting than the pain itself. This is why so many of us eventually break down after years of pretending. The mask of coldness always cracks, because it was never who we really were. Then there are moments of awakening that come through relationships. You meet someone who sees you, someone who draws out your softness, and you begin to trust again. But even then, fear lingers. You give, but cautiously. You love, but conditionally. You're always ready to pull away the moment you sense danger. And yet, in that tug-of-war between fear and desire, you learn something important. Being untouchable isn't about never risking. It's about knowing that risk will not destroy you. Each experience of love, whether it lasts or ends, whether it lifts you or wounds you, shows you that you survive. That survival gives you proof that you don't need to become cold in order to endure. Instead, you learn that you can keep loving, keep opening, keep risking, because your worth is not dependent on whether the other person stays or leaves. The experience of loving and losing becomes the experience of realizing you are whole, even in loss. Finally, many discover that the real shift happens not in one dramatic moment, but in countless small ones. It's in the decision to speak when silence feels safer. It's in the courage to apply for something knowing you might fail. It's in the act of trusting again, even when memories whisper not to. These moments accumulate like tiny victories over fear. You begin to notice that life feels fuller when you risk, even if the outcome isn't always what you hoped. You realize that Untouchable isn't about never being hurt. It's about no longer being defined by hurt. It's about embracing every experience, the painful and the beautiful, as threads in the fabric of who you are. And in doing so, you stop running from life and start walking through it with a quiet strength. You become untouchable, not because you are unreachable, but because you are unafraid to feel it all, and still remain yourself. There comes a moment when silence no longer feels empty but sacred. At first, being alone can feel like punishment, as though the absence of others is proof of your unworthiness. But slowly, if you lean into it, solitude begins to reveal itself as a teacher. You start to notice that in the quiet your thoughts are clearer, your breathing steadier, your heart more honest, the noise of the world fades. And in that stillness, you realize that so much of your suffering came from chasing things outside yourself. Approval, recognition, affection, validation. Awakening begins the moment you see that the external world cannot give you what your soul already carries. Strength doesn't come from the applause of others. It comes from knowing that even if every voice goes silent, your own heartbeat is enough to sustain you. This shift is subtle but powerful, because once you experience it, you no longer feel desperate for acceptance. You still desire love, you still value connection, but you don't depend on them for survival. You begin to taste a kind of freedom that coldness could never give you. It is not isolation, it is rootedness in your own being. Inner strength often begins with scars. The marks left by betrayal, heartbreak, or failure can either be wounds you carry forever, or wisdom that guides you forward. At first you resist them, you wish they never happened, you hide them, ashamed of how they make you look or feel. But with time, something changes. You realize that these scars are proof that you endured, that you walked through fire and emerged on the other side. They become reminders not of weakness, but of resilience. The awakening lies in reframing what pain means to you. Instead of seeing it as evidence that life has been unfair, you begin to see it as evidence that you are capable of surviving more than you thought possible. And once you embrace this truth, strength flows naturally. You are no longer afraid of what might come, because you have already faced what you thought would break you. The scars whisper, "You can rise again." This is the kind of quiet, unshakable strength that makes you untouchable, not because nothing hurts, but because everything heals. There is also an awakening that comes when you finally let go of the idea that your worth is tied to what others think of you. For so long you may have lived in the shadows of opinion, rising and falling with every compliment or criticism. Your mood depended on whether you were accepted, your confidence on whether you were praised. But then, one day, you feel exhausted by the constant performance. You grow tired of bending, pleasing, pretending, and in that exhaustion you find truth. You never needed approval to exist. You never needed applause to be valuable. This realization does not make you arrogant, it makes you free. You stop chasing validation like water in a desert, because you discover the well inside you has always been full. This inner shift changes everything. How you walk, how you speak, how you face the world. Suddenly, you are not swayed by opinions, because you are anchored in something deeper than opinion. This anchor is self-worth, and once you touch it, no one can move it. That is when you truly become untouchable, not by closing your heart, but by rooting it in truth. Strength also comes from embracing the paradox of life. That vulnerability is not weakness, but courage. For years you may have believed that showing pain makes you small, that admitting fear makes you powerless. But the awakening happens when you realize that vulnerability is the very thing that connects us to others and to ourselves. When you open up, when you let the world see your humanity, you discover that your openness doesn't weaken you, it expands you. To say, "I'm hurting," yet still stand. To say, "I'm afraid," yet still move forward, is a greater power than any cold mask could ever offer. Vulnerability teaches you that the heart doesn't need to be locked away to be strong. It only needs to be carried with courage. And in that courage you find an untouchability that isn't about being hidden, but about being real. No attack, no betrayal, no failure can strip you of strength that comes from authenticity, because it is rooted in who you are, not in the fragile masks you wear. This is the kind of awakening that transforms the way you see yourself and the world. Awakening often feels like light after years of darkness. At first it flickers faintly, just a glimpse of clarity, a brief moment of peace. But the more you nurture it, the brighter it becomes. This light is not external, it is born inside, from every lesson learned, every wound healed, every truth embraced. You begin to feel a quiet power in knowing that no matter how dark the night, your inner flame cannot be extinguished. The world may shake around you, people may come and go, circumstances may rise and fall, but that flame remains. It is the reminder that you carry something eternal, something untouchable. This realization is profound, because once you recognize it, fear loses its grip. You no longer obsess over losing things, because you understand that the most important thing, your light, cannot be taken. This is why those who awaken often seem unshaken by chaos. Their strength comes from within, not from the fleeting stability of the outside world. They radiate peace not because life is easy, but because they know their center cannot be broken. There is a moment in awakening when you realize solitude is not punishment but power. So many people fear being alone, mistaking it for loneliness, but in solitude you meet yourself. You hear your own voice without interruption. You reconnect with your own rhythm. You learn what truly nourishes your soul. And when you discover that you can enjoy your own company, you are no longer desperate for anyone else's. This doesn't mean you reject love or connection. It means you no longer need them to feel whole. This shift changes every relationship, because now you come to others not out of need, but out of choice. You no longer cling, you no longer beg, you no longer shrink. You stand tall in your own presence, and that presence becomes magnetic. People sense the difference. They feel the strength in your silence, the calm in your eyes, the wholeness in your spirit, and that is the paradox. By learning to stand alone, you become even more capable of standing with others. Solitude strengthens you, not by making you cold, but by reminding you that you are complete, even in silence. The deepest awakening is the realization that inner strength is not something you gain, it is something you uncover. It was always there, buried beneath fear, hidden under doubt, covered by the voices of others. Life's trials, heartbreaks, and struggles don't create strength. They strip away everything that hides it. When you finally see that the core of you has always been strong, always been whole, always been enough, you stop searching for power outside yourself. You stop chasing, striving, proving. You begin to simply live from that strength, to let it guide you without effort. This is the essence of untouchability, not becoming harder, but becoming truer. When you awaken to this truth, you no longer fear what may come, because you know you are ready for it. You no longer fear who may leave, because you know you remain. You no longer fear breaking, because you have already discovered that your spirit cannot be broken. What was once hidden is now revealed, and in that revelation you find the kind of strength that is not loud, not aggressive, but unshakable. The paradox of becoming untouchable is that it doesn't happen when you harden your heart, but when you soften it and realize it cannot be destroyed. Life will test you. It always does. People will fail you. Circumstances will shake you. Loss will visit without warning. But none of these things are the final word. The final word is always what you choose to do with them. Do you shrink, retreat, and allow pain to dictate who you become? Or do you rise, face the storm, and choose to remain human even when it hurts? The revolution is not in closing yourself to life, but in opening so deeply that nothing can take away your core. To be untouchable is not to be unreachable. It is to be present in every moment without fear of losing yourself. It is the courage to stay soft in a world that tells you hardness is survival, and in that softness lies a power the cold will never understand. A power born not from resistance, but from surrender to the truth that nothing outside of you defines you. When you begin to see untouchability as inner freedom rather than outer defense, everything changes. You no longer live with the constant need to prove yourself, to measure yourself against others, to justify your worth. You realize that comparison is a thief that distracts you from your own path, and validation is a mirage that never quenches the thirst. Untouchable is the moment you stop running after what was never yours to begin with. Control over how others see you, think of you, or value you. You break free from that invisible cage and step into a state of being that is light, grounded, and unshakable. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring in the right way. You care about your growth, your peace, your integrity, your authenticity, and when you care about those things, you become unstoppable. Because no criticism can rob you of peace, no rejection can dismantle your integrity, and no betrayal can destroy authenticity. What is rooted in truth cannot be shaken. There is a quiet power in realizing that your worth has never been on trial. The world may have tried to convince you otherwise with its standards, its judgments, its shifting tides of approval, but worth has nothing to do with opinion. It has nothing to do with success, beauty, wealth, or recognition. It is the simple, unshakable fact of your existence. Awakening to this truth is like taking a deep breath after being underwater for too long. Suddenly, you are free to live without begging for permission. You are free to love without fear of losing yourself. You are free to fail without collapsing in shame. This freedom is not loud, it doesn't need to be announced, but it is felt in every step you take. It is seen in the way you no longer react to every slight, in the way you no longer crumble at every loss. You move differently, because you are no longer at war with yourself. This is the untouchability that does not isolate, but liberates. It allows you to walk through life with a calm center, regardless of the chaos around you. The beauty of this untouchability is that it allows you to engage with the world more fully, not less. When you are no longer terrified of being broken, you allow yourself to love more deeply. When you are no longer enslaved by rejection, you pursue dreams more boldly. When you are no longer defined by betrayal, you open yourself to trust again. You live expansively instead of defensively. People will notice a change in you, even if they cannot name it. They will sense the stillness in your presence, the calm in your eyes, the quiet strength in your words. And while they may think it is confidence, it is something deeper. It is the peace of someone who has found their foundation. This kind of presence doesn't come from building walls, but from tearing them down. You realize that being untouchable is not about distancing yourself from the world, but about standing so firmly in your essence that the world can no longer knock you off balance. The revolution, then, is not external, but internal. It is not about overthrowing others, gaining control, or demanding recognition. It is about dismantling the illusions inside yourself. The illusion that you are not enough. The illusion that you must earn love. The illusion that other people's opinions determine your destiny. The greatest battle is not with the world, but with the voices inside that have kept you small. And the greatest victory is not domination, but liberation. The revolution is the quiet moment when you realize you no longer need to play the games others play. You no longer need to chase what they chase. You find stillness, you find clarity, you find yourself. And in finding yourself, you discover that you were never lacking, never broken, never incomplete. This is the moment where you step into life as it is meant to be lived. Not with fear, not with constant defense, but with open hands and an unshakable spirit. That is the real untouchable, the self set free. And so the call is simple, though not easy. The call is not to harden, but to awaken. To walk through life not cold, but burning with a light no storm can extinguish. To allow yourself to feel, to love, to risk, knowing that nothing can truly take away the essence of who you are. The call is to stop shrinking out of fear and start standing in your truth. Untouchable is not the person who never bends. It is the person who bends and still stands. Untouchable is not the person who never feels. It is the person who feels everything and remains whole. The call is not to retreat into silence, but to step into life with a new kind of presence. The presence of someone who is free. And if you answer that call, you will find that the world changes, not because it becomes easier, but because you are no longer its prisoner. You walk through it untouchable, not by becoming less human, but by finally becoming fully alive.